Welcome in, everyone, to the First Call Podcast, Preakness Stakes edition. I'm Jeremy Plonk from First Bet and Express Bet, joined by our guest handicapper, Scott Shapiro. Best wishes and get well wishes out to our partner, Jeff Siegel, as we get set to handicap the middle jewel of the Triple Crown coming up this weekend. Scott, we've got stakes on Friday and Saturday to get after.
You got to love it these days where we get the stakes action early. We get to wet our whistle, hopefully build our bankroll for the bigger day. But Friday's card's really good. We'll talk about a couple of the races, JP, but the whole card is pretty good, and definitely one that I'll be diving into even before the races that we're going to talk about.
Well, your whistle might be wet. Your hair might be wet. Well, if we had any hair, our clothes might be wet. I mean, everything may be wet at Pimlico this week. It's been raining all week in Baltimore. Horses training over a sloppy track. The wet weather maybe will continue throughout the weekend. Saturday looks like it might be a little drier. We might get a deep drying out racetrack for Preakness Day on Saturday. But certainly from a handicapping standpoint, you want to look at some softer turf conditions in Maryland for sure on Friday and Saturday. And of course, a wet track, a very likely possibility, at least on Friday, if not Friday and Saturday. So put that into your handicapping pipe as you get ready to work out these races. We're going to handicap 8 of them for you on the podcast, as we do each and every week. First Call Podcast usually drops on Fridays for the weekend stakes action. We're going a day early this week. And also, we are part of the first Preakness Stakes wager guide. So if those of you watching within the wager guide enjoy all the stats, trends, handicapping insights on the middle jewel of the Triple Crown. If you're not there, you can find it by going to news.first.com in our blog section. Click on the wager guide link to get you into that first Preakness wager guide. Free access, updated information throughout the course of the week. Here are the races Scott and I will handicap over the next 30 minutes or so. For the benefit of those of you on our traditional audio channels, the lineup reads this way. The Pimlico Special will be our first handicapping chore. That's race number 12 on Friday at Old Hilltop. We'll do race number 13, then the Black-Eyed Susan. The fillies going for their version of the Preakness Stakes. And then 6 stakes that we will handicap on the Saturday program. The Chick Lang Stakes for the 3-year-old sprinters. The Jim McKay Turf Sprint on the grass, of course. The Sir Barton Stakes for the Preakness next cut below, the older or the 3-year-olds running long on the dirt. The Jimmy Murphy for the turfers going for the 3-year-olds, and then the Dinner Party Stakes for the older turf runners. That's the typical lead-in race to the Preakness, and Preakness number 150, post time 7:01 Eastern, for the final Preakness Stakes to be run on what is the traditional racetrack at Pimlico. They will raise and rebuild Pimlico over the next couple years. So this will be our final Preakness Stakes at Old Hilltop for a couple seasons. They are expected to run at Laurel over the next 2 years or so. Back in 3 years' time to Pimlico for a rebuilt and remodeled and completely new facility at Pimlico. They're going to keep the traditional racetrack. There was some talk originally, Scott, about moving the configuration of the racetrack and things like that. But the state stadium authority, and looking at the pricing of all these renovations, thought that was an expense they could probably save and spend more money on the facilities and the operational costs than leaving the track as is. So track records, things like that, are going to kind of feel the same when the new Pimlico comes around, because it's going to be the same oval we've always had there at Old Hilltop, but everything else will be new. It'll be interesting to see. It's kind of a new era in the Triple Crown, right? I mean, Churchill Downs has done a ton of renovations. They've got some big plans that are kind of on hold, kind of planned for future renovations there. Of course, Belmont Park has been down for the past couple of years and raised and being rebuilt right now for a run to come back in another year or so. And we're running the Triple Crown at Saratoga. So we're not even going to recognize this thing by about 2027.
Yeah, pretty interesting that it's played out that way. I don't think it was done orchestrated to be done all at the same time, but just kind of the way the things have worked out. Churchill, the paddock, major difference in terms of the racetrack. The same other than the turf course, which is obviously well known. But looking forward to seeing both Pimlico and Belmont as the new 21st century representation.
Yeah, next year a Triple Crown with Saratoga and Laurel as part of it. So, I mean, the traditionalists, we can't really, we can't throw our hands up in the air and say, no way we can buck any tradition. We're obviously doing it progress will not be stopped in that regard. A long time coming for the renovations at both facilities in Naira here at Pimlico as well. Obviously, a long time coming. Let's get handicapping now. That's why people have tuned in. So let's get to the Pimlico Special. It's race number 12 on the card on Friday at Pimlico. A mile and 3/16, the same distance as the Preakness Stakes. We've got the older horses going in this one, and obviously Pirate East, the horse who won the race a year ago, Will Scratch, has not trained up to the race sufficiently for trainer Cherie DeVoe, hasn't been seen since the Breeders' Cup Classic. So a big change to the lineup to the Pimlico Special, Scott. Still some names in here people are really going to know. Of course, Red Route 1, a veteran who's been a part of many big races. Just Steal, a horse alumni of last year's Derby and Preakness. Encino is a horse who was on the Triple Crown Trail last year for Brad Cox. This is still a pretty darn good group, but I know you've got a horse that you like who may be announcing his presence to a national audience.
Yeah, I was hoping he was going to announce his presence with Pyrenees, the morning line favorite in the race, because that would have made him a far more interesting gambling perspective. But you speak of number 8, Star of Wonder, who seems to be, the horse on the come, if you will, whereas the runners that you mentioned, it's pretty, inarguable they're not quite what they were. Just Steal, maybe rounding back into form, but Red Route 1, he won the Essex, but he's run much faster races. I just think Star of Wonder is going to get a good trip. Second off the layoff, it looks like this was somewhat of the plan, at least for Brad Cox. He's got so many of these horses, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. I mean, he doesn't need this horse to be his best 4-year-old right now, or older horse. He's got First Mission, and he's got Saudi Crown, but there's another one that I'm forgetting.
Most Wanted's running well now too.
Yeah. There's actually a 4. Anyway, he's loaded. So this race, it would be clear to point a horse like this for this race. Maybe not, Kentucky, if you're thinking on those terms. Done very little wrong. His one loss was at Keeneland when he got out of the gate. When he, moved up. Actually, my notes here. Oh, he was 3 wide into the first turn. It wasn't a great effort, but other than that, he just looks like the one that's doing his best right now. And I was hopeful he was going to be a somewhat decent price, but not anymore.
Star of Wonder coming off a victory in a 1/3 mile race at Aqueduct. Let's give the fans a chance to see that one. Let's go to Chris Griffith on the mic.
Stretch, a quarter mile left to go. Nelson Avenue kicks on. The rail is open for Star of Wonder. Might try to muscle on through. Castle Chaos at a big number gets the jump, and Castle Chaos is in front. Star of Wonder has clear running room and is now moving through at the rail. It's Castle Chaos trying to hold off the oncoming strides of the favorite, and Star of Wonder, who makes up ground with every single stride. Star of Wonder pushing on by. Star of Wonder gets the victory over.
Seems like there'll be a fair pace in here for a mile and 3/16 as well, and Star of Wonder might get that same kind of trip. Save ground, try to come from just off that first flight, kind of 4th, 5th, and try to pounce on him, stretching out around 2 turns, but he's got the congrats on the dam side there and probably stretches out just fine. The horse was already a 2-turn winner at Churchill last fall. Star of Wonder, the way Scott's going to get things started here on the podcast this week in the Pimlico Special. Let's go to the 13th race on the card. That'll be the lucky one, hopefully, on Friday's program, the Black-Eyed Susan Stakes. Black-Eyed Susan, named for the state flower of Maryland. The race started as Pimlico Oaks back in the day. 13th race on the card, now named the George Mitchell Black-Eyed Susan Stakes, named for a community leader around the area there, around the Baltimore, the Heights area, around the track there at Pimlico. So the Black-Eyed Susan Stakes feature race 5:44, the post time for that one at a mile and an 8. These 3-year-old fillies. This has been a race that's had some great runners over the years. This is not one of its more vintage cast, though, Scott. Field of 9 in here and no standout choices.
Yeah, I actually just learned something. I didn't know it was called the Pimlico Oaks back in the day. So appreciate the lesson, as always. I would agree. Obviously, not a top-heavy field in terms of fillies that we expect huge things from moving forward. I think part of that is always kind of the Kentucky Oaks. I think we had a great winner in that race. It remains to be seen how deep that field was. So always going to be a bit of a trickle down in there. I like a horse in here that I think is going to take some money, but not go off the favorite. I think Margie's Intention, Running and Gunning, is listed as the 5-2 favorite. I think there's a chance Margie's Intention, the Louisiana bred, based on numbers, will go off ahead. I like a Martho in this spot, 3rd off the layoff. 2 back in the first start off the bench for Eddie Keneally. This one ran a really good second to Drexel Hill, who came back to run second, of course, in the Kentucky Oaks for Whit Beckman. And they went at it a bit early. This horse maybe moved too early under Carmouche. Maybe just wasn't the better horse. And then last time in the Ashland, which again, I'm not sure the quality of that field, but it was better than this field. I think it's pretty safe to say, a grade 1 at Keeneland. And this horse was caught 3 or 4 wide into the first turn on a day where the inside was good. Lacara wired out the field. So I think a pretty easy excuse to make for the Eddie Keneally trainee who gets Luis Saez back aboard.
Yeah, if the Mark runs back to that race against Drexel Hill in the Busher, should be the one to beat in here. I would agree with that. Here is the race in the Busher with the Mark running second.
It's Volleyball Princess trying to fend off the charge of Amarth, who's big down the center of the racetrack, is running after the leader, and Amarth is trying to kick away at a big number here in the Busher. It is Amarth who's sprinting away. Volleyball Princess's game. Drexel Hill is making up some late ground. Drexel Hill might try to split rivals here. Drexel Hill is rolling. Amarth needs the line, and here comes Drexel Hill in the late stages. Drexel Hill, Ben Curtis, they win the Busher. Amarth was second, then came Volleyball Princess, and Fortuna Mia finished fourth in 1 minute 41.4.
So Amarth is 4-1 on the morning line. Locals represented in here by number 7, Reply, lightly raced Curlin filly. I love the Curlins over the racetrack at Pimlico. Not only was he a Preakness winner there back in 2007, as everyone knows, but his sire stats are just absolutely fabulous. His offspring went about 30% over the track at Pimlico over the years with a solid number of starters. So they like the track at Pimlico. Typically, the Curlins. Reply would be no surprise to like it. Coming off a second-place finish in the Weber City Miss, that was the win in your in-race for the Black-Eyed Susan locally. Trainer Brittany Russell with Reply won that race with Complexity Jane, but Complexity Jane is entered in another race on the card on the turf to let Reply run solo in here, and they didn't take the free pass with the Complexity Jane. This was a Rapoli stable $450,000 runner. Obviously, a lot of intent to try to get grade 2 black type on the resume of this one, Reply. Paris Lily won the watch in here, I think, at 8-1, coming off a nice win at Keeneland last time. Beat Liam in the Dust in that one. Those two are running back against each other. Liam in the Dust comes off that second-place finish. I'm not sure why Liam in the Dust would be a higher price than Paris Lily in this spot. Johnny V in the saddle with Liam in the Dust. Maybe that's part of the thought process there. Paris Lily, trained by Brendan Walsh. He's coming off a record-setting Keeneland meet for him. By far his best Keeneland meet ever when he tied Brad Cox for the leading trainer's title. But he has been cold at Churchill Downs since then. I think he's 3 for his first 25 at the Churchill meet. So are the Brendan Walshes still running as good as they did at Keeneland? Scott, what do you make of trainer runs and streaks like that? You know, coming off of Keeneland, it was like everything Brendan Walsh sends out there, you've got to respect. But we've seen a couple weeks now of the Churchill meet. There are enough starters to say he ain't as hot as he once was.
Yeah, I think that's an angle that I'm very willing to look at always often, and trying to catch it before the rest of the public does. Maybe I get a guy, because of these trainers, you know, for whatever reason, some of these barns get hot and cold. Whether it's they point for the meet, you could have other suggestions as well. But in Brendan's case, it's clear that he points for the Keeneland meet, you know, most years there. The one thing negative to me about Paris Lily is that was a very big inside speed track that day in that allowance event. And this was the one that kind of took advantage of that. You add that to the Brendan Walsh hot, not hot factor. And to me, you know, maybe one that I'm leaning against, but it's not to say that I like Liam in the Dust anymore. This was a filly I remember seeing debut, and I liked this filly a lot in the Pocahontas. I think that was her day, and she really hasn't gotten back to that race in my estimation.
I'm with you on Amarth and also Reply. Those are the two I'm going to be leaning on heavily in the Black-Eyed Susan Stakes. That is race number 13 on Friday. Want to remind you, if you bet the Black-Eyed Susan Stakes with First Bet and Express Bet, it's part of a $10 money back special. We've got a money back special, which means if your win bet finishes second or third, you get up to $10 of your bet refunded back into your account in the form of wagering credits. So play the Black-Eyed Susan and the Preakness Stakes for our money back special coming up this weekend. Again, if you're win betting either one of those two feature races runs second or third, you'll get up to $10 back. And it's also part of our Friday and Saturday $20,000 exactathon. Hit, I believe it's 6 exactas on Friday, 6 exactas on Saturday, and you can get your share of $20,000 in prizes $2 minimum exactas. So when you're playing your exactas, make sure you're playing them and opting into the promotion and playing them at the $2 level. These exactathons pay off nicely. We've had some people bring in thousands off of the exactathon by putting up good numbers and hitting multiple exactas in the races throughout the card. So you can play multiple exactas. It's not a one-shot deal where you've got to come up with 6 exactas hitting on a $2 straight bet. It's your exactas in a race. So if you play $40 worth of $2 exactas, if you hit 6 races, that puts you into the prize pool for the individual day. If you hit the most exactas on the card, then there's a separate prize pool for that, and you could rake in $2,000 just by being the player who has the most exactas on first bet and express bet. So again, always opt into the promos. And Scott, I know you've given a little bit of a hand and a leg up to people who want to play that exactathon this weekend.
Yeah, there's actually, before we recorded, they're both the Friday and the Saturday exactathon blog articles, whatever you like to call them, are up on the blog. One of them will, with a couple of races on the Friday card, including the Black-Eyed Susan, and then a couple of the races we're going to talk about in the next several minutes here will be the other two, not the Preakness. I figured we talked enough about that, but I will have a late pick 5 or a pick 5 ending in the Preakness analysis going up tomorrow.
All right, sounds great. Let's get to some Saturday handicapping now as we turn the schedule to race number 8 on the Saturday card at Pimlico. Again, early post. We get started in the morning, 10:30 a.m. post first race on Saturday at Pimlico. So up and at 'em early. 6 furlong Chick Lang Stakes, the first one we're going to look at in race number 8. Chick Lang, named for the former general manager of the Maryland Jockey Club, one of the most popular people. When you talk about like the ambassador of Pimlico Racecourse for decades, it was Chick Lang. And so the race in his name, 3-year-old 6 furlong sprinters. We've seen some good ones come through this race over the years. Steve Asmussen's always wanted to support this race. It seems like he's got a good 3-year-old sprinter in his barn somewhere. I ended up with number 8 in here, 1-900, a horse coming off a big win at Aqueduct last time out. 7-length Victor. This is a grandson of Curlin. Yes, if I see Curlin in the pedigree at Pimlico, I'm always considering. It's a must consider right off the bat. It's not a must play, but it's a must consider. And if you can make any case for a horse who has Curlin in the pedigree, then it becomes a must play for me.
Let me ask you that real quick. I don't want to get too into it. What is the thought process there? Do you really obviously that's a pretty big sample size, and obviously I respect your handicapping, but what is it? Something to the why would that be in your eyes to people out there?
Well, it's similar to Keeneland, and I like to use pedigree handicapping a lot at Keeneland. You don't get horse for course because it's such a short boutique meet like Keeneland. You don't get multiple horses. You can't look back at the resume and say this horse has run 8 times at Pimlico over the years. There's not enough races there, right? They only run a couple weeks here in the spring. They've thrown a September week in there every once in a while in recent years. So how do you know which horses are going to handle the track or not? Pedigree angles can be really strong in that regard, and it's one of my favorite angles at Keeneland. It's been successful over the years, and it's one that people don't necessarily follow because there's no way to really look at it in a stat. It's not printed in past performance information, but if you use things like BetMix or some pedigree software, BetMix is where I look things up a lot, and I'll go through and run Pimlico, run Main Track, run Sires, and that's how I discovered the angle, and 2, just the kind of like the old game of concentration, right? If you see things happening over and over again, you kind of remember where they were. You kept seeing these Curlins running so well, and a lot of times they were in the big stakes races, right? He's had Pimlico Special winners. He's had a couple Preakness winners. So the Curlin angle is like, wow, these Curlins run well, and then that kind of whets your appetite to go in and research it. And then once I researched it, I realized it was more than just a big race thing. It's happening all the time at all the levels. So I think it's important, especially at a boutique kind of meet like this, because if you're at a place like Aqueduct where they're running, 1,000 races a year over the track, the proof's in the past performances. But for a lot of these horses, who's going to like Pimlico? If you look through the Friday and Saturday cards, you're probably going to find 30 Pimlico starts between the whole card, right? I mean, there's just not that many races that these horses have run at Pimlico because of the limited amount of time. So that's why I like to jump on that. And I do like anything with Curlin in the pedigree. So 1-900's by dialed in, but out of a Curlin mare. And again, I really like that last win for Tom Morley last time. 7-length victory, a kind of a trainer who doesn't ask a lot for him right out of the box. And so 3rd start winner there. I think this one's going the right direction. I'll take 1-900. Who do you like in the Chick Lang?
Well, he's the one to beat off that last race, and his runner-up effort was to Colloquial. The start before that, it was a really fast horse at this point. We haven't seen a ton of, but a fast sprinter for George Weaver that won at Keeneland, if I'm not mistaken, last out, right?
Yep.
I think the pace is going to be honest, and that's the way to beat, maybe potentially beat 1-900 amongst others. So my top pick in here is a bit of a lukewarm one with Retribution, who I think ran into a better horse than he faces in here in Gunmeadow and didn't have the cleanest run at Keeneland. But if you check out my Exactathon article, you'll see I keyed around a couple of other horses that I think will be good prices, or at least a little bit in Perfect Force, as well as Ancient World. And those are horses that I think will be coming from out of it. So I think this race has some opportunity, but I clearly understand that it's going to take some beating based on 1-900 last race, but maybe the race shape will help out.
A horse who's going to take some money in here, too, is Keep It Easy. He was a winner of the Ed Brown Stakes at Churchill Downs last November around the Thanksgiving holiday. He's only had one start this year. Dale Romans threw him in the deep end, going in the Fountain of Youth. That didn't work out. He's back to sprinting where he belongs. Romans is really bullish on this horse if you read the racing press, but Dale's bullish on just about every horse he's ever sent to the post. So you got to take that with a grain of salt. But let's give the fans a chance to see Keep It Easy at his best. Travis Stone on the mic here, winning the Ed Brown at Churchill.
Bottled up in behind horses fifth. Tough Catch needs to find a way out. Looked outside. They're off the turn. Keep It Easy comes charging off the turn and kicks away by 4. Tough Catch has shaken loose from the pack. Has 4 lengths to make up on Keep It Easy and just a 16th to do it and won't do it. Keep It Easy dazzles by 4 on the wire.
Junior Alvarado will get the mount on Keep It Easy for the first time. Of course, Alvarado coming off the win in the Kentucky Derby with Sovereignty. He's got some mounts this weekend at Pimlico. He just doesn't have the mount this weekend at Pimlico in Alvarado. Let's go to the Jim McKay Turf Sprint next up. It's race number 9 on the card, of course, named for Jim McManus, better known in TV parlance as Jim McKay, Maryland native, and a guy who was part of the racing scene on ABC Wide World of Sports and the Triple Crown coverage for decades. Of course, well known for ABC Wide World of Sports, and he helped create the Maryland Million, a guy who put a lot into the racing industry in the state of Maryland, the Jim McKay Turf Sprint. This is a race that had been on the Friday card a lot of the years. Remember Ben's Cat running through this a ton for the Turf Sprint ranks at Pimlico on the Friday card but now it's part of the Saturday program. 5/8 of a mile on the turf. I expect we'll be on the grass for the big races over the weekend, but we should look at some soft conditions just as it was last year. It was an absolute bog on the turf, but they ran on the grass last year on Preakness Day. So if there's any thought they're taking races off the turf, it's not going to rain any more than it did last year. They ran on the turf then, Scott. So who do you like in the McKay?
I'm hopeful that maybe a little more optimistic that it'll dry out a little bit, but you probably are a little closer to that scene. But I went with Mattingly, Donnie Baseball, they called him back when he used to rake the ball for the Yankees and be, when our childhoods were existing, one of the most popular baseball card type guys to support. But I'm hopeful that this son of Buchero will repeat his last effort. He just seems to be a horse who is moving into this race in the right direction. I like the outside post. I like Paco Lopez back aboard. I think there's going to be a fast pace in here. Coppola is just a shot out of the gate, speaking of Dale Romans, every race. And you got Boats Are Rocking on the inside, Honeyquest. There's some speed in here. I don't know if I want to be way out of it, though. So I like Mattingly's spot that he should get. And the Florida bred hopefully can. What was his? I forget what his morning line is. Is he a big price or no? Race 9. He is a solid 8-1. So we'll take that.
More than fair there. Coming off the allowance win last time. I don't know if there's a better turf sprint jockey in America than Paco Lopez. He and Joel Rosario are move-ups for me when it talks about riders riding in turf sprints. Say what you want about Paco Lopez and his antics in the saddle, but when it comes to turf sprints, you'd rather have him on your horse than the opposition. Here's his win aboard Mattingly.
Mattingly not waiting. He's going after Refuel right now, and he now shoves a half a head in front. Toward the inside, Refuel tries to counterpunch second. Yes, I Am Free is third. The Cavalry after that, they're on their way home. Mattingly's been sharp today, and he's up to take the lead. Refuel is fighting hard toward the inside. Yes, I Am Free, Louis the Sun King, Outlaw Country, and If Not for Luck. Final 16th of a mile, Mattingly. If you have him, you're home free. Mattingly with a no doubt about it win under Paco Lopez. He's 4 in front.
One of them I like here in the McKay is Witty, the 4. I don't know if he can win. His record looks excellent, though. Look, I mean, he's 9 for 30. There's nothing wrong with that. 20 for 30 in the exacta lifetime for a tried and true turf sprinter. That's not easy to do, to be 20 for 30 in the exacta when running primarily turf sprints, but he always comes with his run. He was second in this race last year to Groom's All Business, but he is susceptible to horses who are more brilliant. I mean, he kind of needs things to happen for him. A great horse maybe to key second in your exotics, but you get the move to Flavian Pratt. And so this horse has just been kind of like, you know, biting around the edges of the sandwich in all these previous starts. Now gets Flavian Pratt. Is he worth a length or two? Maybe so when it comes to a turf sprint. And a length or two in a turf sprint could be the difference between fourth and first in a lot of these. So I think Witty's got a shot in here. I like Pratt getting the call here for the first time. And again, he was a good second in this race last year. So if it comes up soft, we know he can handle a soft Pimlico turf course.
I definitely think this horse has a shot to put in a big run. And to add to your, respect for this horse, you mentioned it's tough to hit the board first or second in these turf sprints. Add to the fact this is a horse that has very little to no speed.
None. Yeah.
You have to work out a trip. You need the race not to be a complete, merry-go-round. So we'll see what kind of price we get. Pratt does kind of pop out in bold letters, when you see that in this spot.
Right.
But at the same point, he's a difference maker on a horse like this. So Witty to me is definitely a use with my top pick.
Man, you just got so much speed in here, like you mentioned. If 4 Harps on the outside with speed just led all the way in the Leatherberry. If they run this Charlestown 4.5 dasher, Duncan Idaho, if he stays in the field, I mean, for Jeff Runco, there's just so much pace in here. It's going to be very interesting. If anybody lives on the front end to win the Jim McKay Turf Sprint, they will have earned it. That's for sure. Coming up in Saturday's 9th race. Let's go to the 10th now, the Sir Barton Stakes, named for the 1919. We'll call it Triple Crown winner. He won all 3 races. It wasn't in the same order back then, and the word Triple Crown hadn't been coined yet at that point. But Sir Barton is the name of the race. Of course, winning at Pimlico, winning at all 3 of the Triple Crown destinations back then. A mile and a 16th for the Sir Barton Stakes. This is a race that produced Sarava way back when, 2002, came out of this race and went on to win the Belmont Stakes. You're 3 weeks out from the Belmont in this race, just like you are from the Preakness. So there could be, in some years, a horse who comes out of the Sir Barton and runs in the final jewel in the Triple Crown. We've got a very lightly raced group in here for the most part. So these are the kind of late bloomers. If somebody comes up with a big performance here, it could springboard him to Saratoga in 3 weeks' time. But let's handicap the Sir Barton as it is, a mile and a 16th, and a proving ground for these 3-year-olds, Scott.
Yes, and another race that looks to have pace in it. And I think one horse that'll take a lot of money and will potentially go make the trip that you speak of. Maybe not because it's Brad Cox, but is Invictus, who is regally bred, 1.2 million, son of Into Mischief out of the Kentucky Oaks winner, Serengeti Empress.
Yeah.
He's going to be a tough horse for me to bet, even though obviously the upside's there. He's never gone 2 turns. I didn't think that was a good maiden race on April 8th at Keeneland. And, there's just questions to be answered here for a horse that I expect in this field to get relatively hammered. So I went to, I don't know how much I'm against him, but it's just going to be an underlay regardless of how he runs. I went to Just a Fair Shake, and I don't think he'll go to the Belmont if he wins. But, man, he ran really good to Pay Billy, who we'll see in the Preakness in the Federico Tessio. This horse was caught 5 wide into the first turn, remained 4 wide on the backstretch. I know Pay Billy was wide that day as well, so maybe not a day where the outside was totally detrimental, but he ran a lot of lengths more than the rest of that field and still was finishing. So maybe there's some upside here for a horse that third off the layoff. This is probably, I don't know much about this trainer. He's 1 for 18 on the year, but I presume to be one of the biggest wins of his career.
Yeah, it would be for sure. Just a Fair Shake in the Testio was making a big move on the turn when we pick it up with Dave Rodman.
Pay Billy 3 wide, Just a Fair Shake. Moving strongly on the outside, and Kentucky Outlaw broke a beat slow. Is coming ridden along there, 4th, almost 3rd on the outside, top of the stretch. It's a wide open Federico Tessio. Just a Fair Shake, just in front. Just a Fair Shake turns in. Pay Billy is battling every step of the way. 3 back, and it's their side move 3rd. Kentucky Outlaw flattened out a bit in 4th as they come to the final furlong, and Bold Diversion is 5th. Pay Billy and Just a Fair Shake, they're nose to nose for the final furlong. Extreme Outside trying to pick up a share is Happily Delusional, but Pay Billy's in front with a 16th to go. Pay Billy, Just a Fair Shake, Surfside Moon, late run Happily Delusional, Pay Billy.
We'll get a little double use out of that video, Pay Billy, coming up in the Preakness. So you got a chance to see one of the local contenders for the feature race coming up. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Him is a horse in the Sir Barton that I really liked last time out in the Bathhouse Row. This is a horse that Ron Moquette's been very high on at Oaklawn, but he's taken him the right way. He hasn't thrown him to the wolves. He did the maiden, the allowance, and then the listed stakes race. He's keeping him in listed company. This is a talented horse. I think he's got a shot in here, but he got away with a pretty easy pace last time, and I was disappointed in the fact that I know instant replay is decent for Brad Cox, Caldera, an okay runner for Lucas. I was disappointed that him couldn't hold them off. That was at 1 1/8 last time. So just in the third start, getting to the 1 1/8, maybe that got to him. Turning back to 1 16th here. Him could be a factor in this race off a bullet workout. He's a talented horse. I've got a lot of respect for him, but I'm going to another Curlin here. And look, Jeff Siegel and I did this podcast for many years, and you're doing a great job filling in for him, but there's no bigger Curlin homer on earth than Jeff Siegel, and everybody knows it, and people joke about it in the comments and things like that. Oh, Jeff picked another Curlin. So I'm just going to piggyback Jeff here because I like the Curlins at Pimlico. Best Friend Rocket, number 2 in here. I'm going to give an upset shot to. I know he got beat 47 lengths in the Arkansas Derby, but that was when Cornucopian ran off like a freak. This horse was chasing, completely gassed in there. Throw that race out, and the form doesn't look too bad. That race 2 starts back kind of puts him in there in the mix, and a horse who doesn't have to be to the front, but will be forwardly placed in here, and draw is perfect in here. Nick Juarez gets a tune-up mount for Lucas for the Preakness. Of course, Juarez was a rider in Maryland for a while, so this is home turf for him. He's a Maryland native, Nick Juarez. I give Best Friend Rocket an upset shot here in the Sir Barton, and if the Curlins have a good weekend, Mr. Plunk's going to have a good weekend.
Man, I just kind of noticed that. I don't have to be that smart to realize that one. But, yeah, Best Friend Rocket, I mean, coming off a freshening for most, this is coming off a major layoff for a 3-year-old colt for Dwayne Lucas.
For Lucas, yeah.
It should be more than fresh.
Looking forward to this one. The Sir Barton should be a good one, and we'll see. Invictus might be a good one for Brad Cox, but Scott and I are both against him in this spot at what looks to be an underlay price. So let's go from the Sir Barton in race number 10 to the 11th race on the card. It's the James W. Murphy, known as Jimmy Murphy, the late trainer in Maryland, trained horses like My Frenchman and Horatius, names you probably know if you've been around the game for a while. 1 mile on the turf for these 3-year-olds, a field of 10, and there's some mixed bag in here. Some horses like Studley Do Right, who look more like dirt horses. Maybe some are hoping to see this race come off the turf and run on the dirt. Barbadian Runner's another one who's run pretty much exclusively on the dirt, but does have one turf race last year at Laurel Park. Scott, I don't know what we're going to end up with as a final field in this race. I kind of anticipate there might be a couple scratches in here, but how do you see the Jimmy Murphy?
Well, Reagans Wit underwhelmed last time without question in a race, the Transylvania, that I thought when I went back and watched it, kind of doing the handicapping for the American Derby, which of course didn't go well again this year. But I kind of came to the conclusion that this wasn't a great race per se. That said, Reagans Wit's lost by a neck to Zulu Kingdom, who won easily in that American Derby. And I just think this horse has the class and is going to, get an honest enough trip to be able to finish the deal in here. I think Shapiro, pretty realistic, maybe getting a little bit of class relief here instead of pointing to a graded stakes race, maybe in New York or Kentucky, probably New York. So I think it makes a lot of sense that Reagans Wit's going to get a confidence booster here. Honestly, if he doesn't win this race with a good trip, I think he's the kind of horse that I will be fading for a significant period of time.
If not now, never. One of those kinds. You got a couple in here for Graham Motion. He's always a horse trainer to watch in Maryland on the turf. He's got End of Romance and Irish Export, and then Soleil Volant. So he's got the 5 and the 6 in here, Graham Motion. I thought the 4 Barbadian Runner, again, just has the one turf race, did close and run 3rd at Laurel in the grass, but I like this horse's late running form in sprint races and one-turn races. I think he might stretch out okay in here and run decently at a mile on the grass. Good post position. Forrest Boyce, an excellent turf jockey. She's one of the better Maryland grass riders over the past decade or so. I think she can get a good trip with this one. Barbadian Runner one, I'm going to take a little bit of a shot with in here if they stay in the field, but I won't be surprised if they're thinking maybe this is a main track kind of entry and come out of the race. If they decide to stay in here, Henry Walters, then I'm going to give a shot to Barbadian Runner, perhaps in their Reagans Wit, my second choice. Probably end up being absolutely the horse to beat. Like you said, that race in the Columbia, Jason Beam on the mic, we're going to see and hear in just a moment. That race would win this for sure.
As Zulu Kingdom takes over the lead. Zulu Kingdom, here's Reagans Wit coming after that one, and these two hook up at the top of the stretch. They put a length and a half on Peace Cloud. Early Adopter trying to run up. Revolutionary was last early. He's up to fifth. The gray starting to roll down the outside. Zulu Kingdom by the eighth pole. The lead still about a length. Reagans Wit, second. Revolutionary, early Adopter. They're back third and fourth. Zulu Kingdom still there. Reagans Wit trying to surge on Zulu Kingdom. Zulu Kingdom holds on to win the Columbia.
If this turf course is really boggy and we get more rain over the weekend, End of Romance would move up in my handicapping for sure. Anytime you see the foreign pedigree, the foreign race experience, there's just an advantage on the soft turf that the American horses don't have. A, they're not bred for it. B, they never get to train over it. And C, they rarely get to run over it because races come off the turf. Certainly never get to train over a soft turf course. So End of Romance would be a horse who moves up for me considerably if the conditions remain poor on the turf course over the weekend. So a couple different ways to look at the Jimmy Murphy in our early handicapping there, but certainly the horse to beat will be Reagans Wit coming off the races at Tampa Bay Downs and at Keeneland. Let's go to race number 12 on the card. Next up, it's our express bet race of the week. It's the Dinner Party Stakes, grade 3, $250,000. The Dinner Party Stakes was the first stakes race ever run at Pimlico. It was won by a horse named Preakness, so they ended up naming the big race after Preakness, the first stakes winner at Pimlico. The Dinner Party Stakes is usually in that slot right before the Preakness Stakes pretty much every year over the last 50 years, except a year or two. I think they ran the Murphy or one of the turf sprints or something right before the Preakness a year or two ago. But it's back where it belongs. It's the spot right before the Preakness Stakes in the last 2 years. And for the runners in the Dinner Party Stakes, we've got the 1-2 finishers from last year's race back in here. Balnikoff won it last year. The runner-up, Crabs and Beer, the ultimate Maryland named horse, Crabs and Beer. They ran 1-2 in this race last year, Scott, but they are 1 for 15 since then. So I don't think we're going to see a replay of 2024. Who's new for 25?
Yeah, and I think that, while the course may have the bog in it, I don't think it'll be quite as bad. It was pouring throughout those 2 days leading up. We'll see. But I think the race shape is going to be much different. And while Balnikoff is going to be one of the horses you would expect to take quite a bit of money with Pratt coming back aboard and the win over the course and, getting some little bit of class relief, you could argue maybe. But I don't think the race shape is going to play out for a horse like Balnikoff to benefit. I just don't. I look around, very, very little speed sign on.
That's it.
And one thing I noticed too is Sadly Joseph Jr., 2 horses in the race, and one of them, Abramar, a long shot on the warning line, has speed. He hasn't necessarily been gunned to try for the lead. Last time out was at a mile. He stalked, maybe a little quicker pace than we could expect in a year. I don't see any reason why Jose Ortiz aboard Abramar will not be aggressive from the gate. You mentioned the third place finish or success over this type of course. Finished third last time, over this course, over the soft going in the Jimmy Murphy. So to me, and that was not using his speed. So I'm going to hope to sneak this horse out to the early lead while, others might be leery that this horse will make a loose lead because I think it's wide open if the pace is as unhonest or slow as I think it might be.
We see this race exactly the same way, and yet still came up with 2 different horses, because that's why I'm on Irish Aces. They put blinkers on him last time, and he went to the lead at Keeneland, and I just don't see any other speed in here other than Abramar. I've got speed question mark with Irish Aces because he's not a confirmed front runner by any stretch, but once they put the blinkers on him, they took advantage of the pace last time, and I'm hoping Umberto Rispoli does the same thing here. Brendan Walsh has cooled since that Keeneland meet, but I thought Irish Aces might be able to kind of get up front, and the other horse I had in here with the press/speed mark was the 5 Abramar. Everybody else has no intention on the front end whatsoever. So I kind of look at it as the 9 and the 5 control this race, and one of them probably wins the thing. That's the way I'm looking at it. You lean to the 5, I lean to the 9 in here, and cases can be made logically for both of them, but certainly if you're going to play a closer in this race, they're going to have to do a lot of work on their own because they're not going to get a race shape that kind of hands it to an off the pace type in here. There's some good closers in this race. You've got, Fulmineo, who's already won over this track. You got Fort Washington, who's going to be coming from off the pace with a lot of talent. Trickery for Graham Motion, maybe a horse who has shown a little bit of pressing ability in the past, but never really to the front. Trickery has been coming from off the pace in recent starts. So the talented horses in this race all seem to have the same running style from the back. And I think this is one where you don't necessarily bet the best horse. You bet the horse with the best scenario.
I agree with that. And I think it's an interesting spot from a wager. Well, always an interesting spot, the dinner party right before the Preakness. But, maybe you have more of a stand in the Preakness, whether that means you're on journalism or not. This is a race where we are, referencing horses that should be a good price. One horse that I don't think has the speed on paper that I want, but now that I'm looking at it, the rider switch to Louis Saez on the 1, Divine Propos. I know the horse is coming out of further races and why I didn't give him much of a chance, but with the inside draw and any sort of intent, he might be able to make a lead as well. So I don't love the horse. I don't love that, Louis Ray and those races out there this winter, compared to this field. But if we're looking for another horse that could be up front and steal this thing, you never know.
If the 1 does get to the front, that turf marathon form is going to be tough to run down at 1 1/8 miles, right? I mean, for the big turf races we see around the country, this is a middle distance race at 1 1/8 miles. This isn't, we're not stretching them out like the Manhattan or, one of the big races later in the year. So this is a race that, if a horse of that kind of stamina can get to the front, he could be pretty tough in here. I actually picked him 3rd in here. I had it 9, 10, and 1, Fort Washington from off the pace. I think Fort Washington will like these kind of course conditions. Hasn't run in that sort of race yet, but he's out of a Turtle Bow mare. And that's like, anytime I see Turtle Bow, I'm thinking like, bogs. And so a soft turf, I think Fort Washington will run well over this kind of racetrack. I'm against Trickery in this particular spot. I mean, I know he's coming off the 3rd to Carl Spackler last time, but I think it's a really tough post for a horse who's only run against the older horses twice. He's run 3rd and 4th, didn't threaten to win in either one of those. He made all his hay in those restricted 3-year-old stakes races last year. So this is a tougher spot than a lot of the races that he's won. Now, that last race, again, Carl Spackler would be 1 to 5 in this spot, probably coming off the way he won that race at 1 mile. But Trickery to me is going to be an underlay, especially from the 13 hole. So I'm going to take a shot against him in here. Interesting runners in here that are all coming back. Abromar, one of those that you picked out of the Jimmy Murphy last year, right? The Jimmy Murphy we already talked about on the card was the 3-year-old turf stakes race on the Preakness Day undercard. Top 3 finishers from that 3-year-old turf stakes, they're all back as older horses now running in the dinner party. That says something about their quality and the program and getting those horses back for a second year on Preakness Day. Let's go back to last year's Murphy where it's Fulmineo getting the victory. But again, top 3 in here, they're all back again.
Speediness confronted by Torqueo on the outside. Set down is Fulmineo. Fulmineo center of the course. Now charging right to the lead. Speediness. Crystal Quest trying to quicken up. 1 off the inside. Down to the last furlong. It is Fulmineo and Flavian Pratt in front by 3. A gang of horses. Here comes Abromar on the far outside. Down to the inside is Crystal Quest. But Fulmineo is clear. Fulmineo does it by 3 in the James W. Murphy from Crystal Quest and Abromar.
Abromar should be closer to the pace than that one, Scott. I would think for sure the way this race sets up.
I would hope so. And I'm with you. I don't know if Trickery is going to end up being as low as the morning line suggests, but I thought this horse had some good setups and good trips in the races that he won back against the restricted 3-year-old company that you mentioned. I don't love Johnny V in general on an outside horse on the turf at this point of his career. I think he's going to try to get him as close to the front as he can is the one thing, but that's a tough task. So this is a good betting race, and particularly based on my opinion, as we'll talk about in the Preakness, to maybe try to find some value in here.
All right, shop around for that value. Maybe work it into the exactathon. Try to knock off one of those exactas for the big $20,000 promotion that we got coming up on Friday and Saturday. Time now to talk main event. Let's go to the Preakness Stakes. It's the big one, race number 13 on the Saturday card. 14 race program at Old Hilltop. They'll run the President's Cup UAE race after this for the Arabians, but 7:01 the post time for Preakness number 150. The historic race has the Kentucky Derby beaten favorite Journalism. He's 8-5 on Dan Illman's morning line. Second choice in the morning line was second choice in the overall betting on Kentucky Derby Day, that being Sandman. River Thames at 9-2, Clever again at 5, Goal Oriented at 6, and then the prices go up double digits from that point forward. Scott, let's talk about the Preakness and the favorite Journalism, trying to bounce back off of 2 weeks. He'll do what many horses have done over the years in the Preakness Stakes, and that's run back out of the Kentucky Derby. We don't have sovereignty here, but it seems that Journalism has given enough good signs that his connections, Aaron Wellman and Eclipse Thoroughbred Partners, and the multitude of partnerships that own a piece of this runner and trader Michael McCarthy, they've been happy with what they've seen. This video here, courtesy of the Eclipse Thoroughbred Partners Twitter feed. This is him training at Churchill Downs, just a light gallop before he got on the van and arrived earlier this week at Pimlico. He's had very light training at Pimlico over the past couple days over the sloppy track, just a light jog. We're not going to see him at full gear, so we're not going to know the impact of the Kentucky Derby on Journalism probably until the quarter pole of the Preakness Stakes, right? I mean, they're going to go along there, and then we're going to find out what he's got, Scott.
Yes, and for many reasons, first and foremost, I hope this horse comes back and runs well and has a tremendous 3-year-old campaign, so we can hopefully put to rest this 2-week thing that maybe is true, maybe is not. I don't know enough, but in my estimation, it's being overstated. But look at this horse; he looks like he's as good as ever. Like you said, we'll find out if the 2 weeks is an issue. On some numbers, you could be concerned that he's going to regress and maybe even regress somewhat significantly. But the problem is I think everybody's got to take a step forward even to beat him at his B- game. So it's a tough, it's going to be a tough task to beat this horse, assuming he gets a clean trip under Umberto Rispoli.
None of the top 6 from the Kentucky Derby except Journalism are back. So like you said, those others are going to have to step up to beat this performance.
Umberto Rispoli, and he's picking off horses one by one on the far outside. Neo Atwos is the leader at the top of the stretch. Journalism is on the move as they turn for home, and Sovereignty is coming with him on the outside. The two of them go right by with a furlong to run. Journalism and Sovereignty, nose to nose, down to the last 16th of a mile. Sovereignty has taken the lead. Journalism is second toward the inside. Baeza is third, but it will be Sovereignty to rule the Kentucky Derby. Journalism.
Not much difference in the finish there between Journalism and Baeza. So they kind of ran almost the same kind of race, just in different running styles, Santa Anita Derby to Kentucky Derby. So if we talk about how Baeza really moved forward and ran a great race there running third, Journalism, I think, probably ran about his race there until the final 1/8 of a mile. That's where I was surprised. He's never had a horse come to the outside of him in a race before. That's the first time it happened when Sovereignty came to his outside. He's also never been hit with the left-hand whip before. And so I think when Rispoli went to the left-hand stick when Sovereignty was outside, I don't think he got the response. And I think maybe, just maybe, that might be one of the reasons why he kind of shut down over the final 1/8 of a mile. He ran an 88 Brisk late pace figure in the Kentucky Derby. This horse was consistently 100, 105, 109. This was way off his best finish. Could it have been the mud? Could it have been the taxing trip? Could it have been the 1.25 miles? That can also take something off the fastball of a horse's finishing ability. The fast pace of the Kentucky Derby, yeah, you're 8-10 lengths back, but you're 8-10 lengths behind a really cooking pace, so you're not going to finish with as much flair. There's some reasons why he didn't finish as well, but the reason he lost is because he didn't finish as well. So it's really a situation of there's not Sovereignty back in this race. There's not Baeza back in this race. I'm with you. I think if he runs a B, he probably finds a way to win this race. If he runs an A, I think he wins for a comfortable margin.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think if he, some horses do respond off quick rest. Ask the coach. Ask Bob Baffert. If he is one that wants to run, I haven't gotten that sense overly that Michael McCarthy's too worried about it, but who knows with what we're hearing at this point.
Right.
But, he will crush this field, if he puts forth anything, if he put forth that San Felipe, I mean, it's not even going to be it's just going to be a clinic, right?
Well, he stretched out off his debut win to 21 days, so he's run off 3 weeks, and then he came back and ran again 28 days later in the Los Al Futurity. So his debut to the Los Al Futurity, he ran 3 races from October 27th to December 14th. So he's packed some races in there. The schedule this year hasn't been as demanding because they're set in stone. We know when we're going to go: San Felipe, Santa Anita Derby, and then on to the Kentucky Derby. And one thing that may help him now that we really haven't talked much about journalism with is he missed the Bob Lewis Stakes back in late January. I believe it was supposed to be the last day of January. He missed that race with a little bit of illness that was going through the barn, and then missed a couple days training, but then got right back on the workout tab. That means he only had 2 preps up to the Kentucky Derby, and he's a fresher horse coming out of the Derby than he would had he run in the Bob Lewis, right? And had he run in the Bob Lewis, he'd have been stacking more races, the Los Al Futurity at the end of the campaign as a 2-year-old, and then he ran in January, then he came back in, the San Felipe. Then you might say, well, could he kind of be on the south side of his best? You could make a better case for it that if he was on the 4th race of his form cycle, that he might take a step back then as the 3rd race of the form cycle. So there could be one of those deals where it didn't benefit him back then, but it might turn out to be a benefit now that he didn't run in the Bob Lewis. I still think he's the horse to beat. I am a little concerned. There is not a scenario in my mind that I thought if he turned for home with the lead in the Derby that he would get beat.
Yeah.
I just didn't. He was by far the best finisher in the crop. So if he got the lead to the top of the stretch, I was shocked that he got beat. Still, he ran 2nd. It's not like he ran 5th. So it cracks the door open. If you think somebody else might be able to upset him in this Preakness, I don't think it's coming from the back of the pack. If somebody beats him in this year's Preakness Stakes, it's going to be a front-end freakish kind of effort. We saw Seize de Grey go wire-to-wire on the slop last year. That same kind of scenario is probably the way he gets beat in this race if it happens, right? Somebody just runs a cracker on the front end, refuses to stop, relishes the mud while others kind of flounder behind, and that's the way we get large margin victories on sloppy tracks happen in everyday racing. I think that's the upset recipe in this Preakness. I'm not exactly sure which horse it comes from, but 2 that make a lot of sense would be Goal-Oriented and Clever Again. Both have a lot of speed for trainers who have won multiple Preakness Stakes in Baffert and Asmussen. Highly talented horses coming off wins last time out. Lightly raced. We don't know what their ceiling are. They're kind of the same horse, Clever Again's 1 step farther in the form cycle with 3 starts in a stakes race. But the Baffert factor with Goal-Oriented and Pratt and the rail in the Preakness, I think that kind of levels them out. I can't separate those 2 underneath, but they seem like the 2 horses that are most likely to pull an upset if there is one.
Yeah, to me, there's 2 ways to look at this race. Are you going to try to beat journalism on top? If so, I completely agree. I'd be very surprised if it's not one of the 2 horses you mentioned with the upside, with the Barnes. I much prefer Clever Again for the fact that he's clearly been pointed for this race for a while, whereas Goal-Oriented kind of seemed like he was thrown into things. But that might be a positive, and you get Pratt as well and potentially inside speed. Then you have to, but then you can look at this race. Well, I think journalism is going to win. How do I want to find value underneath? And I think that might be a different approach because I don't think either Goal-Oriented or Clever Again have to be there. Maybe you can make the case for horses that'll be even bigger prices that have a little bit more foundation and we know what more to expect.
What do you make of this one? Sandman, here he is at Pimlico after arriving for trainer Mark Casse. He was kind of a late entry into this mix. I think they looked at the field and said, look, it's going to be the easier spot of the races between the Preakness and the Belmont. We've got a horse who, come off a similar finish to what we saw with War of Will for trainer Mark Casse back in 2019. Casse's had success here at Pimlico. Not only won it with War of Will, but he just missed by a head with Classic Empire, who was coming back on 2 weeks for the Derby. What do you make of Sandman? His late running style, but it's all kind of pace aided to me. And in the Kentucky Derby, even with the fast pace, it wasn't enough to get Sandman into the ticket. He was respectable at 7th, but not a factor in the result.
Well, look, he could definitely pass a lot of horses in this race. He's, run some, definitely run good enough races to do so. But you got to ask yourself, is this field, with the fields that he was beating in Arkansas equal to this field, equal to the Derby field? We saw that it was not. I mean, maybe it was the off track, but there's a very strong chance we get that again. And like you said, I mean, he had things. He didn't have an excuse. We saw horses from off the pace, all, you know, the ones that we respect coming out of the race, all finished well, including a horse that hadn't even raced over the dirt yet. So, you know, there's some questions to be answered there. And then you take into the account that this horse gets a lot of buzz. You know, if he was just another horse in another race, maybe, you know, maybe clever again and, you know, goal oriented, somehow take more money in some pools. But with the steam this horse gets from the ownership group, from Griffin Johnson, who's done a great job promoting, you know, but I think that gives us an opportunity to make money in this race because he had things his way last time as much as he should have. They all came with a run that we respect. He did not. Maybe we can get Sandman out of the exacta or trifecta. And if so, I think that's the best opportunity to find value in this year's Preakness.
Yeah, he's one that if you take a stand against, it'll help the exotics. Another one based on the morning line, I don't know if it's going to play out that way, is River Temps. He's 9-2 in Dan Illman's morning line. If he is 9-2 in here, he's a horse I'm pretty bullish against. And so I would like him to be 9-2 in here. And I'm not saying that he won't. Dan could very well be right in here. And if he is right, I'll be happy if he's off the ticket at 9-2 because I've questioned this horse's distance ability. He's out of a discreet cat mare by McLean's music. He's not bred to go that far to start with. He stretched out, and yes, he took Sovereignty to the brink in the Fountain of Youth, but Fountain of Youth Stakes, not a particularly blazing pace that day. And also at a mile and a 16th, they used the 16th pole finish line. That was his derby. To win a big race in a 3-year-old situation, graded stakes with a 16th pole finish line, to me, that was his best chance of winning one of these majors in the spring. He ran a good race that day, but I thought he went back in the Bluegrass. That race did not come home fast. The Bluegrass result was not super flattered. A 5th, 6th place finisher in the Kentucky Derby, but certainly not big factors on the win end. I think River Temps is a horse who probably Pletcher, if you could kind of give the truth serum, you know, put the Wonder Woman rope around him and try to figure it out. Pletcher doesn't want to be here. He rarely wants to run in the Preakness Stakes with his horses. He's run very few over the years. This feels like a play by the owners, potential breeders, Windstar Farm, China Horse Club. They look at this as their best shot. They're not winning a mile and a quarter. You know, in one of the big ones. This is not a Travers or Belmont horse. It's a mile and a 3/16. It's an easier field than maybe they'll get in some of the other races. They obviously didn't make the Kentucky Derby with River Thames. This is a horse to me who I think he's going to be exposed at a mile and 3/16 even. I don't like him.
Yeah. How many times, do you see Todd Pletcher horses get caught in that spot that were supposed to be legitimate in the Fountain of Youth or anywhere at Gulfstream? I know it was Sovereignty, but he was supposed to finish the deal that day, and it cost me money, so I didn't forget. And then you look at the pedigree, and it all makes sense, right? You know, he ran well at Gulfstream when he was just faster than the other horses. He was able to seal the deal. And then you have to ask yourself, well, I agree with everything you said about the Bluegrass. I don't need to get into that. When has Todd Pletcher opted to skip the Derby when he's had a chance to run in it? I mean, I've bet on him. I mean, I like Dynamic One in the Derby. I mean, he was 68-1 one year.
Yeah.
You know? Like, he takes his chances there. So, yes, it's a difference, a little bit of a class distance. As good as this race always is, 20 horses, you get everybody that can run in the Derby. You get some that drop off. It just seems like they're kind of, you know, maybe we can sneak this out. So, my best hope for River Thames is an underneath 3rd or 4th type finish, because I do think this horse has talent. Maybe if the race shape and his trip goes his way, he can be there for an underneath finish. But if he's going to be 9-2, there's nothing really to get excited about there.
Yeah, he just seems like he is a talented horse. I'm not knocking his talent. I just think the distance is what's going to end up getting him. He's a miler to me on his best trip, and they've got to find those kind of races. And this is a Preakness with other speed. I mean, he's not any of the speed really in here. I don't think River Thames is going to contend for the top 2 going down the backstretch. If he is, he's going too fast. And if it's a no lead, no pass situation, then you can't keep a horse like that on your ticket. And I kind of think that's where he ends up. He's not going to embarrass himself in here. He's not going to run last, anything like that. But I don't think he's going to handle the mile and 3/16. If we've given way too much time for a horse we don't like, which means we just talked him into being the winner of the 150th Preakness Stakes. That's the way it goes. When you badmouth the horse to that point, they usually come back and bite you in the ass. So expecting a good run now after all that talk about River Thames. That's going to wrap up our handicapping on the 8 stakes races here. We hope you enjoy other information throughout the first Preakness Wager Guide. Be sure to go access that for free. Go to news.first.com. Top right corner, you'll find the Wager Guide link there, and you can go in and check out all the information from the handicappers around the First family. Not only picks for Preakness, but also Black-Eyed Susan. We've got the full card picks both days from the First Bet Artificial Intelligence. The computer has spoken. See who the AI likes for all 14 races on Preakness Day, and the full card on Friday as well. Scott's in there. I'm in there. Millie Ball, Michelle, you coming off the Black-Eyed Susan picks for Michelle. She's also got her picks in there for the Derby, and Millie's got Derby analysis with Scott and I as well. So a lot cooking in there, and be sure to check out all of the handicapping information we have for you at First Bet and Express Bet coming up this weekend and beyond. Scott, it's been a pleasure talking handicapping here with you over the past hour. Good luck to you on Preakness weekend.
Yes, good luck to you as well. Rumor has it you've had some big Fridays. I don't know. Some birdie told me that before we spoke today, but hopefully we can make it a big Friday and Saturday this year. I think there's some really competitive races. Hopefully we get the some weather to cooperate somewhat. If not, we'll adapt like we did 2 weeks ago.
Let's hope our 2 horses control the pace in the dinner party and then set us up for a big Preakness score as well. Okay, on behalf of everybody with First Bet and Express Bet, my partner, Jeff Siegel, get well, pal, and my partner today, Scott Shapiro. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.